Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I am glad you could join me on this episode of the America's Founding series. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website at pasreport.com. And make sure that you share this episode with your family and friends. It's time that we talk about the forgotten patriots who have been lost through history, but they played a very crucial role, not only in securing independence, but building the most exceptional nation that the world has ever seen. And when we look at the America's Founding series, it's a way for us to remember the people that have been ignored in history. It's a way for us to get back to our roots, understand what the American identity is all about and the values that shaped our great country. And I want you to imagine a revolution on the brink. You know, we had valiant soldiers that were fighting the British. You had the Continental Army that was being led by the unwavering leadership of George Washington, and they were standing against the mightiest empires on the face of the earth at the time. And courage alone doesn't win you wars, right? I mean, when we look at it, obviously, we have a bunch of ragtag farmers going against a superior military, but armies also need food. They need ammunition, they need supplies, they need uniforms, and they need to be funded. And in the fledgling days of the American colonies, money was actually scarce. Money was scarcer than a loyalist in a Boston tavern. Times were tough. Our country was broke. And if I told you that the fate of our experiment, the American experiment, would almost end before it even begins, that the idea of liberty didn't just rest with the generals and the soldiers that were on the battlefields. It didn't just rest with statesmen like Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, but that the American Revolution rested on two individuals, two unsung individuals that history has ignored, men who never fired a musket, they never put on a uniform, yet they armed the patriot cause with something that was just as vital. They armed the cause of freedom with money, cold, hard cash, because every army needs money. And today on the America's Founding series, we're going to pull back the curtain on two very important heroes who have not received their due. And I'm talking about Robert Morris and Haym Salomon. These two patriots, at immense personal risk, became the financial backers of the United States, of the American Revolution at the time. And without them, this country probably wouldn't have existed today. Without their tireless efforts to secure funding, the dream of the United States of America would have vanished before it ever unfolded. And that's the important part, because our story is going to begin across the Atlantic in Liverpool, England, where a young Robert Morris first drew his breath. And fate, or maybe it was opportunity, brought him to the colonies at the time. He went to Philadelphia as a teenager. He was someone that was a quick study. He was sharp-witted. He possessed a natural talent for commerce. And by the time the rumblings of the revolution began, Morris was already a wealthy man. He didn't need the revolution. I think this is an important point because too often, you know, a lot of people think that the American Revolution was so that a bunch of white guys could become even wealthier. But these were people that were putting everything at risk, and they didn't need to. They were accepted in British circles. They were invited to the top parties. They were people who were successful already, and they put it all on the line. Robert Morris was a very influential merchant, and his ship sailed across the seas. His name was respected in the halls of the colonies, but also around the world. And across the European continent, it wasn't just about Robert Morris. In the vibrant land of Poland, another future champion of American liberty was growing up. And I'm talking about Haym Salomon. This was a Jew, a Polish Jew, but he was a linguistic prodigy. He spoke multiple languages, and this skill would prove critical to the American cause. You couple that skill with his keen understanding of finance and his vast network of connections, and he would prove invaluable. And when we look at Salomon, you have to understand his background is unique because it instilled in him a deep and personal yearning for freedom. For centuries, Jewish communities across Europe were facing persecution, and they were denied their basic rights. So you had the Enlightenment ideals of self-governance and religious liberty resonating deeply within his soul. As the flames of the revolution ignited, both Morris and Salomon found themselves drawn to the cause of the patriots. For Morris, he was a man of means and standing. He was principled. He believed that the British were unjustly taxing us, and it was tyrannical rule. So he decided to channel his considerable business acumen into the revolutionary effort, and he served on key committees within the Continental Congress. He worked tirelessly to establish some type of rudimentary financial system here in the colonies. And he understood that without stable economic foundations, the revolutionary cause is going to quickly crumble. So he understood the importance of being financially astute. When it comes to someone like Salomon, he arrived in America around 1775, threw himself into the revolutionary activities almost immediately with fervent zeal, and his language skills made him such an asset because not only was he able to communicate with certain groups, but he was also really good at espionage. He moved within various circles throughout the colonies, gathering intelligence, using his financial skills to discreetly support the patriot cause, and his commitment was absolute. It was fueled by a profound belief in the promise of a new nation that's going to be founded on the principles of liberty, freedom, and equality for all. And for Salomon, this wasn't just a political struggle. It was a fight for the very ideals that had been denied his people in Poland, who were under constant attack for generations. Now, in 1776, didn't work out too well for Salomon. His clandestine activities got him in a lot of trouble. He was caught by the British because they started to pay attention to him. He was arrested and imprisoned in New York, and for months, he endured the harsh realities of captivity. Yet his spirit would never break despite the grim conditions he found himself in. In fact, even behind bars, even while in prison, Salomon found ways to advance the patriot cause. He would use his language skills to try and convince the German Hessians to ditch the British and support the colonists. He would try and speak to the British guards and get them to turn against Britain. And he would also speak to the prisoners that were there. He would try and undermine British efforts. Eventually, he was released, but he remained under tight watch with the British. He was on constant surveillance, but it didn't deter him. If anything, it strengthened his resolve for the cause because he knew it was at stake. He knew the risks, but his belief in the cause of liberty outweighed any of those risks. Any personal fear he had. He tasted oppression, he understood what it was about, and he would fight with every fiber of his body to ensure that the new nation, the United States of America, would be different. These two were remarkable men when you look at Robert Morris and Haym Salomon. They helped create this great nation, shape the ideals of our nation, and ultimately build the American identity. And I want to fast forward to 1781 because the American Revolution is now dragging on for several years at this point. It's a grueling and costly affair. I believe that we lost nearly 6,500 troops in the American Revolution. You know, you calculate that in today's population, and you're talking about hundreds of thousands. General George Washington was the only one that was able to hold this together, the steadfast leader of the Continental Army. He's going to try and make a decisive strike against the British forces at Yorktown to end this thing. And victory was within reach, but there was a big problem. There was a big obstacle that stood in their way. And that was the utter financial collapse of the Continental Congress and the colonies. You know, the Continental Congress was effectively bankrupt. It didn't have any more money. And whatever money is printed is virtually worthless. You have soldiers enduring years of hardship, years of sacrifice, who were going unpaid. And they believed in the patriot cause, but you need to provide food for your family. You need to put food on the table. And the soldiers, not only were they unpaid, they were hungry themselves. Some of them didn't even have boots to walk. Think about it. Ammunition, supplies were low. The morale was about to crash. And Washington needed money. He had to change this. So Washington, it's estimated about $20,000 that he would request. And this is, we're going back to 1781. $20,000 is a lot of money at that time. If we calculate it in today's day and age, adjust it for inflation, it's about several $100,000, probably about $450,000. And Washington needs this money. He has to feed his troops. You're going to go into this major battle. You want your troops to be fed. You want the supply lines open. You want to mobilize the troops for the final push and give them hope and optimism. Without this money, the entire campaign, the very hope of American independence, is going to teeter on the brink of disaster. Now, a desperate Washington had to turn to the man who had been tirelessly working to keep the revolutionary finances afloat. So he went to Robert Morris. Robert Morris at the time, understand, Robert Morris is only one of 6 individuals to sign both the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution. A couple of weeks ago, I highlighted James Wilson as another one that did that. So Morris is in a league of his own. And at this point, he's serving as the superintendent of finance. But even Morris, he was extraordinarily resourceful as a merchant. He was someone that navigated countless financial storms in our young history. And unfortunately, he had to deliver some grim news to George Washington. The coffers were empty. That was it. We're out of money. The funds were not there. And in the moment of a profound crisis, with the fate of our new nation hanging in the balance, Washington issued his now famous directive, which is a testament to the quiet yet crucial influence of Salomon. And Washington said, "Send for Haym Salomon." Now, despite facing constant scrutiny by the British, understand, Salomon was imprisoned twice by the British. First time he was imprisoned, he was released. Second time, he ended up escaping. And despite facing constant scrutiny and having already poured tons of his own personal wealth into the revolutionary cause, Haym, he answered the call. He used his energy, his relentless energy, and he leveraged his vast network of connections among merchants and financiers, both Christian and Jews, and he embarked on what seemed like an impossible mission to get Washington this money. He personally, throughout the revolution, pledged his own credit, tirelessly negotiating loans, taking it under his own personal name, liquidating his own assets, all to secure these desperately needed funds. And against all odds, he delivered. He got Washington the money just in time. So Washington now had the means to feed his army, secure the vital supplies he's going to need in the Battle of Yorktown, and the march begins. And thankfully, we fight with honor, we fight with courage, and we are able to defeat the British. This was a decisive victory, a decisive blow to the British, and we finally would secure American independence. We would win the war. Tragically, the immense personal sacrifices of both Robert Morris and Haym Salomon came at a heavy cost. Morris, despite the pivotal role he played in financing the revolution, despite the fact that he was one of 6 founders and framers signing the Declaration of Independence, he also signed the Articles of Confederation, and ultimately signing the United States Constitution. Unfortunately for Robert Morris, he died in financial ruin. He even spent time in debtor's prison in the later years of his life. Actually, because Robert Morris was so broke, it's why we created some of the bankruptcy laws that we're still using today. Here's a guy, the very nation he helped create, and because of the way he died in financial ruin due to land speculation, it never adequately recognized his contributions the way they should have been. When it comes to Haym Salomon, this Polish Jew who passionately embraced the ideals of American liberty, he never received full repayment for the vast sums of money he personally advanced to the cause, the revolutionary cause. And unfortunately, he would die impoverished, leaving his family to grapple with the financial consequences of his unwavering patriotism. I mean, think about it. And imagine The American Revolution all comes down to this $20,000. Imagine this $20,000 never materialized. Imagine George Washington's army, the Continental Army, dissolving, the Yorktown campaign collapsing, and the American Revolution sputtering to a disheartening end. Without the financial genius and unwavering commitment of Robert Morris and the extraordinary efforts and personal sacrifices of Haym Salomon, the map of the world may look very different today. There might have never been a United States of America. These were men who understood that the fight for liberty wasn't just waged on the battlefield, that the fight for liberty required resources. It demanded financial fortitude. It depended on the selfless dedication of individuals who believed in the cause so deeply that they were willing to risk everything and put everything on the line. And while I don't know for sure, I would almost guarantee you that despite the way they died, broken, impoverished, I would guarantee you that they would do it all over again. We mutually pledged to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That's what binds us as Americans. That's what shapes and creates the American identity. And it seems like we've forgotten that in 2025. And we've forgotten it for quite some time. That's why I do the America's Founding series. These stories are so personal. They're so unique. Human beings, ordinary men that do extraordinary things. It really is remarkable. Now, if you found the content of this episode informative, please give the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating. Take 30 seconds to write a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And share this episode. Share it with your family and friends. Share it with others who appreciate American history and everything this country stands for. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back next week with other great episodes of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at pasreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.